Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you're viewing this podcast. This podcast series we call Race, Culture, and the Church. Race, Culture, and the Church. We are over 50 episodes into this series, and it started 1 week after the murder of George Floyd. And so I invite you to review our body of work. Thank you very much, Drew Escobar with Preemo Media, and all of the hard work that he has poured into this endeavor. But this is a series that we have striven to create community awareness, if you will, just to have conversations with different folks in the community that we wouldn't otherwise have those conversations or have a depth of knowledge about. A lot of times when we are viewing things and people on TV, it's 30 seconds, 60 seconds. But here we strive to have 25 to 30 minutes of a real conversation with folks within our community that are important to the shaping and the formation of this community. And probably there is none more with the ability to shape and to form things than our very own Dr. Flo Cofer. Dr. Cofer, welcome back into this space.
Thank you so much for having me back. This is, I think, my third time on the show.
I think so.
Yes.
The third one. And the last time it was right before the primary.
That's right.
And so now we're post-primary, but pre-election. How do you feel? Yeah, you exhaled. So.
Taking those deep box breaths and every time I get a chance to breathe.
How do you feel? How's Dr. Cofer today?
I am excited and exhausted. That's typically how I describe him. I'm the two E's at the same time. I'm excited because I really do feel energized. Like, this has just been such a wonderful experience of getting to know more of my neighbors, of coming together with a shared vision and purpose, and really, instilling some hope and a path forward for us as a community. And that makes me really excited. And at the same time, it's a lot of hard work.
How many doors did you knock on?
We knocked 25,000 doors.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was huge because we didn't have any paid canvassers. So all of that was the hard work of our volunteers and me, going out there on weekends, in the evenings, and having conversations. And we also had over 60 house party fundraisers. So between April of last year and November of last year. So just, more than weekly, we were getting together at someone's home with 20 or 30 people and talking about the vision and answering questions and raising dollars for the campaign. And we were also attending events and just doing so many things for the campaign to get to know people, to engage them, and to allow them to have a space in the campaign. And that was really exciting.
Was there a theme? Was there a common refrain that you heard when you were in all of these homes, these private spaces where folks were unguarded and just talking with Dr. Flo? I'm hearing this comment more often than others. Is there something that's...
Yeah, there were a few. I would say one of the first ones was a feeling of frustration, but not frustration just because things weren't going exactly as we wanted, but frustration that was born out of, I really do believe we can do better. And so when I came, on the scene as a candidate and said, I really do believe more is possible and I see a path forward, and I was naming some of the things, I think that really resonated with a lot of people. They were seeing the same challenges, but also the same opportunities. And so I think the ability to be able to name very clearly what was wrong, but also how we could do just a minor pivot and be able to have so many more things go right, I think really resonated with people.
Minor pivot. I think between the last time we spoke, I don't know if you're going to pivot from this pothole, $70 million and growing deficit that the city is facing.
Yes.
I don't know if you or anyone else saw this coming. Was this a Is this a structural issue?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it's a structural issue because, when I was on the Measure U commission, I joined we call it committee, but we're going to be streamlining it and calling all of them commissions soon. So when I was on the Measure U committee, we looked at our budget and we looked at the 5-year forecast. And so I joined the Measure U committee in 2019. And so we had the 5-year forecast going out to 2024, which brings us to today. And we knew that if we didn't do certain things, we were going to be in trouble, right? Because our pension obligations were going to increase. We had the natural increases that happen with personnel over time. And so we knew that there were some things we needed to do, which is one of the reasons why the council paid back in 2018 or 19 a couple $100,000 to an organization called Management Partners to be able to get some process and efficiency recommendations for how they could streamline some of the costs for the city. And I don't agree with all of them, but they gave 39 recommendations, and a good chunk of them are pretty good. The ones I don't agree with are, contracting out existing positions in the city. I don't think that's always the best idea. Contracts certainly have a role in government. We can't do everything with internal staff positions, but I don't think turning those into contract positions is the best. But there were a lot of other recommendations, including things like regulating overtime for our police and fire staff, because that overtime being unregulated was costing us a lot of money. There were things in there about how we could, better do some of the work that we were doing. So same services, but saving money doing it by just not wasting time and energy that could be better spent elsewhere. And so had we done some of those things, we probably could have saved somewhere around $40 to $50 million per year.
Wow.
And so what's frustrating to me is that every year when we sent recommendations to the council, one of the things we said to them was, look through this document and pick some things out that you're going to do and do them quickly. And it felt frustrating to me that the one thing they decided to do from the list was the business operations tax, which was on our ballot that just this past March as Measure C. And it failed. And I was actually opposed to it, not because I don't like the concept, but because they rushed it through in this way that didn't include the necessary community members to be a part of it. The folks who have professional licenses, whose taxes and fees were going to go up. And they didn't have a conversation with them about how best to structure that. And so I am a big believer in it's not always what you do, but how you do it. And that was an example of me agreeing with what needed to be done, but not how it was done.
You had mentioned, thank you for mentioning what you just said. It kind of triggered my memory that one of your foundational positions is to communicate and to work together across diverse groups.
Absolutely.
Is that, you would think, it's city council, city government, that's something that's a natural thing. It's like breathing air. I'm thinking it's maybe not.
I think it's something that that sounds nice, but practically speaking, I don't know how committed we are to it. And what I mean by that is, one of the things when we were hearing, people wanting change and feeling like we could do things better, a lot of that had to do with the fact that we have so many people in Sacramento who have rich, experience and expertise that we could draw upon to be able to do things. And because many people don't understand the natural process of bringing coalitions together and hearing community voice, they're frustrated by it. So I think in principle, I think nobody would say, no, I don't want to hear from community members. But the way we structure things is to be able to quell opposition, right? And so in doing so, we're basically saying we see you more as an obstacle to progress than as a partner in progress. And we're not willing to go through those normal steps that you have to of bringing people together and identifying a common purpose and figuring out what you can do together and hearing some of their dissent and not necessarily doing everything they want you to do, but the idea of hearing from them so you can make what you are going to do better and less burdensome and more agreeable. And I think because so many people don't necessarily have a background and skill doing that, it feels a lot easier to just rush things through at the last minute and try to have as few people know about it as possible so that there's nobody there yelling and saying they're upset about it. But if you go about this in a much more structured way from the outset and being able to say, here's what we're planning to do. We want to get your feedback. Here's why we're moving in this direction. We'd like to, you actually garner trust from people. And you also can build partners who will then roll up their sleeves and put in some work to be able to help make the thing that you want to do more successful.
What's that adage that you had shared before about going fast versus going far?
Yes. So there's a saying always about, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And people often feel as if it's saying fast is bad and far is good. But sometimes you do have to go alone because you do need to move quickly, right? I mean, anybody who's a parent knows if you need to run to the store really quickly, you probably don't want to take your 4 kids under 4 with you to the store because there's going to be a lot of, I need this. Oh, we forgot that. Oh, I got to get you in the car seats and all of that, right? And get you out, and it's going to take longer. So if you want to go fast in that moment, you're going to go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together, because if you're doing a road trip and it's just you, well, as soon as you get tired, you have to pull over and stop. And that means that could be hours you're not making any progress on the road because you're tired. But if you have 4 people in the car and you can rotate, 2 of you being asleep and 2 of you being awake, you can stay on the road continuously, right? And so you can make progress even when 2 of you are asleep. And that's a way to really think about, how we can make the long trip when we do things together. But it does mean that we have to take more frequent bathroom breaks because now you have 4 bladders to deal with, right? And you have 4 appetites to deal with. So we may have to stop a little more often, right? Like, you're going to go further, but you're also going to, you're going to need to be able to accommodate that. And it may not be the fastest trip.
I like to position my thoughts in pictures like you just did. I love that. I get that image completely. So are we on a long trip?
We are on a long trip. And I think that our government is really set up to take us on long trips. And I think that there are times when we can go on short trips, right? There are things that the background has already been done on, and that we can move on those things.
But where we're at, where City of Sacramento, Dr. Flo Cofer, potential mayor of the City of Sacramento, with council members, city manager, constituency, we're on a long trip.
We're on a long trip. And I think that we have so to talk about, the frustration and the opportunity, we have some real frustration from everyone about how we have managed homelessness and our housing, situation in Sacramento. A lot of this has been years in the making, right? We haven't built enough housing. So that has naturally led to increases, just based on supply and demand. And now we're at a place where we have to talk about affordability and attainability of our housing. And so what does it look like to be able to do that? And what does it look like to be able to meet the needs of the people who immediately, need help? But the opportunity here is that we are a city where 30,000 people wake up early on Thanksgiving morning to do Run to Feed the Hungry. We're a city full of people who care. And when I knocked on those 25,000 doors, almost every single one of them named housing and homelessness as their number one issue, even when I was knocking in neighborhoods where these people were securely housed and not at risk themselves. They were naming it because they were frustrated by what they were seeing and what they were experiencing. And so that is a high level of alignment on identifying the problem, which creates an opportunity to be able to do something about it, because everybody's already bought in that this is important, this is high priority, and we should be working on it. So that, while it's not great that we have the problem, it's great that we all can name the problem, because, 12-step program, the first step is admitting you have a problem.
Correct.
So we're already past step number 1. And so that gives us an opportunity now to be able to do something about it.
Begs a whole lot of questions. So, but let me ask one question that I want to get a window into Dr. Cofer's feeling on. So when you went to sleep on the primary night, you were positioned in 4th place.
Yes.
A few weeks later, you're positioned in 1st place.
1 week later.
1 week later.
Yes.
I thought, well, it just shows I'm late to the party. Tell me how you felt. Were you surprised initially? Were you surprised later? Or no, you saw this coming? Yeah.
I was actually surprised initially because our team went into election night thinking we were going to be 2,000 to 3,000 votes behind everyone, just because we knew how many, because we had been knocking, especially that weekend before, and we knew just how many people still had their ballots and were planning to turn them in. We knew how many ballots. We were out the day of the election and, in those days leading up. Near we were outside of the 100 feet from the vote locations throughout the county. And so we knew how many ballots were being turned in. We knew people were honking and saying, "We voted for you," So we knew a lot was going to be coming in late. I shouldn't even say late. We make it seem as if it's late. On election day.
Correct.
I am an election day voter. I turned my ballot in that morning. I like the pomp and circumstance of election day.
You want the sticker.
I want the sticker. There's nothing wrong with it. It's one of my favorite days of the year, if I'm being honest. Always has been. Because it was the first, when I turned 18, it was like, there's this really grown up and adult thing I get to do that separates me from my childhood self. And it just felt really exciting to be a part of that. So a lot of people were voting on election day. And so we knew that. So we expected, based on just the demographics and where we thought the leanings of the early voters were going to go, that we would be significantly behind. It would have to make up ground over time. So my team was really excited when election night came and that first batch came at 8:00 and we were only 1,100 votes behind the number one candidate. We were like, but we had to, of course, we're in for it. We don't want to like celebrate too soon.
So they say don't count
right?
the chickens.
Before exactly.
Yeah.
So by the end of the night, we were only 700 votes behind and we were gaining faster than everybody else. And that's what you often look for, is how you're gaining. And so we had jumped the biggest, even though we were still in fourth place. And so I put my phone on airplane mode that night. Because I needed some rest, and I was like, "There's no further updates until Friday." So I took some rest, and I went to bed, and I felt really good about what we had done because I knew we had left it all in the field. I knew we had run a really good campaign. I knew our volunteers had been out there, and nobody had worked harder than we had over the course of the last year. So I felt really good about where we were. And then Friday, we had jumped up to second. And by Tuesday, a week later, we were 2,000 votes ahead. And then we just continued to climb as more came in. And we ended up being 9,000 votes ahead of, the second place candidate. So that was exciting to us. And it was exciting to be able to see the fruits of that labor, that our message was resonating with people, and that we came together and did something really powerful that a lot of people didn't think was possible.
Across all precincts?
Yeah, so we did extremely well. Of course, because we were 9,000 votes ahead, we won the majority of the precincts. But, the Bee did a really great article, talking about where we won the biggest. And I'm really proud that we won the biggest in our lower income neighborhoods where people often don't feel seen and heard and feel like, and have been, left behind in many instances from conversations about where the city is going. And are not people who often are able to donate money to campaigns and be involved in the same way. And they really were. And so that was really honoring to me that, when there's a lot of mistrust, that they were willing to place their trust in our campaign and the vision that we're presenting for what we can do together for the city. But we also did well in the places that I think people weren't expecting us to. We did really well in places that were more affluent. We did well in communities, of all backgrounds. And so that was really nice to be able to reflect the diversity of Sacramento and to see people come out and say, yeah, we want something new. We want a public health approach to things. We want some real solutions, and we want someone who talks to us like a human. And so I think that resonated with voters.
So speaking of public health, again, you're an epidemiologist by vocation, and you're with the Public Health Advocates.
Yes.
How are you able to squeeze all of this? Okay.
It's hard work. I try my best to schedule myself really well so that I have, my day job and my responsibilities there. And then also being able to do all of the campaign events. And it's a lot of me, doing evenings, weekends, lunchtime, before work, all of those kinds of things to be able to squeeze it all in. And make sure that, we can do everything. And I have a really, really fantastic team of both paid staff and volunteers that make this engine go, because we can't do it alone. Mm-hmm. And so that is one of the key lessons of this race for me personally and professionally is we work in teams, and we work better when we work in teams. And so when we have the opportunity to be able to have people who can take on real responsibility and help, take the help.
Again, the primary was in March.
Yes.
And so the general election is this November. I'm sure going to encourage everyone, get out and vote.
Yes.
So right now, for this recording, we're right at the end of May. Where between now and November, where is Dr. Cofer's campaign for mayor of City of Sacramento going?
I've been telling everybody we're going to do exactly what we did for the primary election, but bigger. I've sometimes said on steroids.
More balloons,
Yes.
more bunting, more streamers.
Yeah, it's going to be, we're going to be in more places. I mean, one of the real beauties of our race is that we have a lot of volunteers. We had over 400 volunteers that knocked doors, that hosted house parties, that got involved, that, sent us events and helped host us at events that were happening in the community so we could get our message out. And so those volunteers are, tabling at farmers markets and at events coming up, and just really, really helpful. And so we are planning to, in just a couple of weeks, train more volunteers and get them out to be able to, be throughout the city, helping us to knock doors, helping us to host events, helping us to do all the things necessary to get the message out. Because for me, this isn't just about the campaign. This is also how we're going to govern together. And so what we're building right now is the lattice, the structure for how we are going to be able to disseminate more information, how we're going to get people involved in their local governance. And so it really is meaningful to me to think about, how do we get more people to be at the table when we're making decisions? How do we slow down processes so we can hear their voices and benefit from their wisdom and expertise? How do we get more young people involved in this process? We've really focused on them a lot in this election. And so that's the part that gets me excited, is what we're building now will help serve us in November, but November is the start line to this race. All of this is just training. This is the start line for what we're going to do together after November, which is govern together.
So you envision some type, again, lattice work. I like that. That's an image I can picture where the vines of governance are crawling up that lattice.
Yes.
You envision real grassroots, dare I say, democracy.
Yes.
In your approach to being mayor.
I think Sacramento has a great opportunity to be able to bring people together. And it really frustrates me when I hear about these factions that exist in Sacramento of people who feel like they're sworn enemies but have not spoken to each other. It's one of the reasons why it frustrates me that, right now we have city staff and our city manager and our police department saying they're not going to sit down with the police review commission, right? They're engaging, instead they're upset about, outside advocacy activities. And so they're not going to sit down with their neighbors. We should not be in a place where we're not having conversations. That's just not acceptable. And it's not the way we get things done. And it certainly shouldn't be acceptable on the side of our city staff to be saying, I don't like what you say in certain spaces, so I'm not going to engage with you in these other spaces. Say that. If you need to say something, come to the table and say, I really don't appreciate that you said X, Y, and Z. Like, I want us to all use our big people words.
Well, I'm surprised that that's even an option where I can choose not to talk to you.
I can choose not to do my job, right? Because ultimately that's your job. Yeah. And so doing your job shouldn't be optional. And also we need to do a better job, and it's one of the things I'm going to take on as the mayor is we need to make sure that our staff have some basic skills to be able to do their jobs, among them conflict resolution. All of our leadership should know how to do conflict resolution, because people are going to come to you and they're going to not like things, or they're going to want something different, or they're going to yell. And we have the responsibility, having taken on these paths, to not dismiss people because they didn't come wrapped in a perfectly, middle-class package, right? We have to be able to engage people of all different backgrounds and really be able to hold their pain. I mean, it's to me, it reminds me a lot, because we're recording this inside of a house of worship, right? And when I sometimes look at people coming to City Hall in particular to share their frustrations, in many instances, it feels like an altar. People are bringing their problems to this altar. And they are saying, you are the people we have elected, help us. And in the same way that we don't tone police people when they come to the altar in church for how they say it or how they tell their testimony, we have that same responsibility when it comes to our governance of not tone policing people when they come to share their testimony, but finding ways to be able to honor that sharing, because there can be healing in the hearing of a testimony. But there also can be healing in the coming together and addressing some of the needs that are identified.
Some of the, again, beautiful word pictures that you're painting, some of the issues, some of the challenge and what you just described is, particularly within the African American and Hispanic and, the chronically underserved communities, we don't go to the doctor until the problem has really gotten
Yes.
really bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, now I go to the doctor and you present your issue, and it could be really, dare I say, terminal, or it could be something very significant. I guess the question I'm trying to frame is, as you approach this, my sense is there's a lot of burnout, frustration, turnoff of voters, people in general, but in particular, those that are even younger than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The younger, the 20s and 30-year-olds that is like, you know what? Government hasn't done anything. They're not going to do anything. And if you hear from me, it's when I'm ready to bring in the torches and
burn
really burn it all down.
Yes.
Let's just take it all apart, because I haven't seen the process work for me. How do you respond? I don't even know what the question is.
I think it's a great question. And here's how I would respond. I think systems are perfectly designed to get the outcomes that they do. And so when we see, certain communities being served and others not, that's not a design flaw, that's a feature. And so if we want to better serve our communities, we have to start with, how did we design this system? Did we design it in a way where only people from certain backgrounds are able to access? I mean, I think about it just very simply, right? So this has less to do with maybe the Black community here, with the exception of maybe some of our immigrant communities, but we are the most integrated city in the country. And we have a lot of people who do not speak English as their first language. But if you're trying to access city services and be a part of city governance, it is very difficult to find things that are not in English. And so we have not built a system that is reflective of the people who live here, right? And so when we do that, we have systematically excluded them from participation.
Is that intentional, or is that just ignorance, or is that, I don't know.
If we want to go far, we have to go together, right? So it means we have to slow down.
Somebody said that a few minutes ago.
we can't move as quickly, right? So it means that I can't just type something up and boom, post it. It may need to go to somebody else for translation, right? It may need to, there are some ways in which we will have to do things a little bit differently to make them more accessible to everyone. But when we do, it's very much like recessed curbs. They are great for people who are using, wheelchairs and other mobility assisted devices. But boy, when I have a suitcase or when I'm pulling a wagon, I'm glad for them too, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a way that when we design in this way to be able to allow more people in, it helps to benefit everyone. And I think we need to think about it that way. But I think your example of people not going to the doctor until the last minute is an appropriate one. Part of that are some of the structural barriers. For some people, it's not having easy access, right? So if you have to wait months for an appointment, life changes over those months. And so you may not set it up because it's too much of a hassle. If you can only go during certain hours, which means you have to miss work, and you may not get paid for that time, it's not set up for that to be something helpful for you, right? And if then when you go, you are disparaged and treated poorly, there's not a high incentive for you to go back, right? And so I think, yes, we all have the responsibility of doing our preventive care, but also our systems have a responsibility for making that preventive care accessible and attainable and affordable and convenient. And when we don't, then we have people not using it and then showing up when things have gotten really, really bad, when we may have been able to do something earlier had we also taken on the responsibility, we as the institution, to make this more accessible for people. And so that's how I think about our government, is that there are so many things that we've done to make it really hard for people to participate. Right now, the city's website, I mean, I don't want to disparage whoever did the revamp, but it is so incredibly difficult to find basic things on the website. It's like we went in the
I can
opposite
attest
direction,
to that.
right?
I can attest. If you have to go more than 3 clicks to find what I need, that's not a good design.
It's not a good design.
And it's more than 3 clicks.
Yes, it's complicated. It's difficult. I mean, I hate to say, I was joking around with some friends and we were like, okay, we're gonna play a game where whoever can find the following things fastest wins a prize. It's really hard to navigate. And so I think some of what we've done is make it difficult. I mean, even the knowing what's being discussed. we could, and this is one of the things I'd like to bring to the city, we could say at the very beginning of a year, hey, council members, city manager, department chairs, et cetera, what are some of the things that some of the policies, some of the budget asks that you want to bring before the council? And then those get placed on the website, and they can go maybe to the PMPE committee to be scored. So we can say, here are all the public safety proposals that are coming.
PMPE?
It's Personnel and Public Employees Committee. So they are over a lot of the things related to how the city is structured.
Okay.
And so it could go to them, and they could say, okay, these are all the public safety proposals. These are all the youth-focused proposals. These are all the parks proposals. These are all the proposals related to the library. Here are all the things that are happening throughout the city. And then we would be able to have an opportunity to be able to have those proposals first go to our commissions, where it can be a community member to community member conversation, because all of those are appointed community members who have some interest or expertise in the area, and people could come and talk about what they like, what they don't like, what amendments are needed, and whatever that conversation includes can be included in the staff report when it comes back to the council. It's a process very similar to what we see at the state, where you actually have the opportunity to be able to go and say, what bills have been introduced? Who sponsored them? Who's in support? Who's in opposition, right? How much will they cost before you're making decisions on whether or not to approve them? And we don't have something like that in the city. So we get an agenda that's posted 5 days before the meeting. And 2 of those days are weekend days. So there's not enough time to reach out to your council member. There's not enough time to reach out to your union or to your neighborhood association or to your neighbors or your nonprofit or any of those folks to be able to say, how do we feel about this?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So is there a city, and I've gotten the high sign, I do have, but you're coming back before the election.
Of course.
Is there a city you can point to that has adopted a process similar to what you just described?
I would point to not necessarily a city, but the state of California does a much better job. And we have so many people who, our current mayor, my opponent, right, who work at the state level, who could bring that level of structure. That's what's needed. When people say, I don't know what's going on, nobody consulted us, like time and time again, we hear the same complaints over and over again. We should be responsive to those complaints. Those are real complaints of people wanting to be involved, but finding it difficult to know what is going on. That's a problem that we should answer and we should address.
That is a problem. And again, I'd like to, not the end result is the same, but I would hope that's a result of an error of head, not of heart. But the results are the same. Dr. Cofer, it is always a pleasure speaking with you. It's an honor to have you in this space. As I said, you must come back before the election.
Of course.
We have to continue this conversation. Definitely appreciate everything that you're bringing to this conversation. And as I said before, I say now, praying for and with you.
Thank you.
And looking forward to what the future holds.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.